The following is an email exchange between me and a missionary a couple months ago. I've changed his name to Bob, all right? Hello, Pastor. I pray that this message finds you well in this challenging time of transition and flexibility. We have been in prayer for the national church to not only survive, but thrive during this time. As newly appointed career missionaries with the Assemblies of God, it is definitely a difficult season to try and raise the necessary funds to get where God will have us serve. I don't believe any other missionary class has had to try to itinerate during a year like we've had. We understand the tension of wanting missions to remain strong in your churches, but having missionaries in person for offerings might seem overwhelming right now. We've been trying to think of ways to connect with churches, even if we cannot be there in person. We were invited to make a missions video to introduce ourselves along with our mission field. We want to share it with you in hopes to have the opportunity for you to share it with your congregation or missions committee to see if a monthly partnership is possible. Every little bit helps. In fact, with those that have given so far, we've ranged from a $5 a month all the way up to a $200 a month and everything in between. It averages out a little over $50 a month. We're currently praying for 50 more partners at that $50 a month mark to be fully funded. Would your church consider being one of those 50 to help send us to the field? Our 5 kids are really excited as well, and they made their own video to show that. They are really wanting to go to public Slovak school, so we need to get to the field by May to find housing, get a crash course in language, and be ready before the end of the summer. We're thankful for how churches have been able to keep the message of Jesus moving forward and keeping the Great Commission the first priority. We continue to pray for you. Blessings, Bob. Hey, Bob. Our entire missions budget is dedicated to local church planting. A lot of work to do everywhere, right? Keep at it. Sincerely, Michael. Look, if you write long emails, you get long emails back. I'm just going to tell you. Thanks, Michael. I will keep at it. Just some numbers for outside of America pulled from Assemblies of God World Missions. 7.4 million people, 6.9 spiritually lost until the whole world hears Bob, missionary to Slovakia. I hear you, Bob. Sadly, America has gone spiritually astray. Got to take care of my own country first. Warmly, Michael. Michael, I don't disagree completely. Right? It's like anytime someone says, that's interesting. You know what that means? You know what the word interesting means? It means I think I disagree with you, but man, I really don't want to keep talking about this. It's an interesting position you have. Yeah. However, it's not one or the other. It's both and. I'm glad that the Assemblies of God doesn't have the same mindset you do. That made me like Bob. By the way, a quick search shows me you have 57 AG churches within a 50-mile radius of you. There are only 38 in the entire country of Slovakia. Many places, it's less. Be well, Bob. Bob, I'm not Assemblies of God. I'm not sure how I got on your list. Claremont County is fairly rural and in the Midwest. One would assume that it is primarily Christian. However, that's not the case at all. See attached from the 2010 census. So even though there are 57 AG churches and numerous other Protestant churches within 50 miles, we are still rapidly declining even in the heartland of America. If we don't establish effective churches, soon missionaries will be even more hard up for cash and will need Slovakia to send missionaries to us. Hence, my mindset. Warmly, Michael. It's warm, right? Michael, your church website was somehow listed in the AG directory, so I do apologize for bothering you. But it does make sense to me now why you don't give to missions. Bob. Bob. Well, that makes more sense. But we do give to missions here in the States. If you're going to plant a Reformed church in a neglected county, look me up, warmly, Michael. Now listen, though I'm a little annoyed by the phrase career missionary, if old Bob is preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ and planting or building up biblical churches in Slovakia, he is doing a praiseworthy service to our God. And those who share his vision and commitment to Slovakia honor God in supporting his work. I have no intentions to diminish it. But there is a clear subtext in his emails, and I certainly baited him a bit to draw it out. Bob said, but it does make sense to me now why you don't give to missions. He didn't say foreign missions. He said missions, as in all missions. In other words, supporting the efforts of local church planting isn't missions, right? No, missions in the mindset of most Christians happen out there, way out there, across oceans, in deep jungles, in isolated mountain ranges, in far-flung pagan lands full of strange customs and different tongues. That's missions. When I was in my late teens, I repented of my sins and confessed my faith in Jesus Christ at a small church in Bright, Indiana, on a Friday. And the following Monday, I went to the card catalog, 41. We still had them back then. If you don't know what it is, well, Google it. In Lawrenceburg High School library, and I looked up Christian. And there were two books not checked out, Augustine's Confessions and David Wilkerson's The Cross and the Switchblade. So I checked them both out. And I read both of them. Confessions is one of the greatest books of all time. You all should read it if you haven't. Sadly, our school's edition was in Old English for some reason. So though I read it, I only understood a very small portion. The Cross and the Switchblade, however, was an easy and very compelling read. It told the true story of a small town pastor going to New York City to preach the gospel to violent gang members in the 50s. And they were violent. They did terrible things. Some of them, namely Nicky Cruz, repented and were converted. And this, in time, led to the establishment of a ministry that some of y'all might know, Teen Challenge. And that's a ministry that's ministered to various types of addictions, namely drug and alcohol, but it's kind of branched out in the last couple of years. Nonetheless, to me, the son of an alcoholic who lived next door to a bar in a ratty upstairs apartment in a small town, and so there's a bar here, and here is our apartment right next to it. I lived up here, and when people would get out of the bar, I think they kicked them out at 2:45. They'd come out drunk, and I'd sit up there with my BB gun, and I'd shoot them. They wouldn't know what was going on. So there was, I'm not saying there weren't fringe benefits, but in terms of like a pro-con list, the con was pretty high. But growing up, seeing that sort of addiction in my own family and in my front lawn every day, this was an absolutely captivating story. The risk, the boldness, the glory of the mission, all of it, I loved it. And not long after that, I read Roger Steer's biography of J. Hudson Taylor. Hudson Taylor was a missionary to China, to which many of the Chinese house churches can still trace the roots back even today. As I read the book, I again was captivated by a young British man's willingness to go to great lengths and take huge risks to bring the gospel to a challenging context. I was so inspired that I named my firstborn son Hudson Taylor Foster. And then I took 2 years of Mandarin Chinese at Northern Kentucky University, which I forgot almost all of it. I'll give you a Chinese lesson right now. Ma, 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 ma. 4 different words, okay? Right? That's tonal languages for you, not the funnest. But as I took those courses at NKU, I had an eye towards China as a possible destination. I talked to my now wife about it. But something happened along the way. Through late high school and early college, I taught neighborhood Bible studies and did skateboard outreaches, mostly on the east side of Cincinnati. Funny story, it's not on my notes, not in this version anyhow. One night, all my friends ditched me because I'd become a Christian and I just wouldn't shut up about Jesus, because that's what happens when you've been saved, right? And they had ditched me at a movie theater, and I walked up 50 Highway and was like, Lord, I don't understand. I'm serving you. I'm being faithful, and you're taking these people out of my life. What are you doing? I was really asking. I wasn't doubting the goodness of God. So there was a drug basket. We used to call it drug bucket. This was back when you still had hometown pharmacies. I could have walked in the front, but for some reason I decided to walk around the back side of it. And there were skaters there. Now, you might not know this because skaters are sissy preppies these days. But back in the 90s, skaters was actually kind of a rough group, believe it or not. Nowadays, you're like, what type of latte do you drink? But as I walked through there, contemplating what was going on, someone skated up to me and said, "Do you know Jesus?" Now, I had that "no Jesus, no pain," the KNOW and "no," that shirt, back then, so people could know you're saved, you had to have labels on you in the 90s. So I thought maybe this guy was like mocking me. That's what I thought was going on. And I was like, man, I got to fight some skaters tonight, But he wasn't. He was he was a real brother in the Lord, and it's crazy. We don't know which one it was, but it was either Eric or his brother, and he's here tonight. And I was thinking, man, if he hadn't asked me that, I would never met my wife, and I wouldn't even be here. Like, it set this chain reaction off. Someone is sharing the gospel with me there, and then I started running with these guys and hanging out, and I quit wrestling for a season. Made my coach so angry. But I went to Bible studies all the time, and that was through high school into college. And these ministries were amazing, what God was doing. And as I ministered to the Eastsiders, Eastsiders of Cincinnati, this was in southern Indiana, Lawrenceburg, I was reminded of the great spiritual darkness that I myself had been rescued from. And if you've read J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, those are my people, right? Regardless of the genetic bloodlines, culturally, those are my people. Poor, on government assistance, at times violent, sexually immoral, generally unmotivated white trash with a generic religion that's a few part Christian and many parts superstitious nonsense. What is it with white trash guys and the Illuminati? I don't know. What is it with it? I guess the black people have systematic racism, and white trash has Illuminati. And then it was that Zeitgeist video over there for a while. How many, anyone know what I'm talking about? Anyway, so my hymn book growing up was Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. That's what I sung to, right? My Michelle. So as I met these people, it turned out that I was not unique. And it wasn't just the lower class. If you read Charles Murray's Coming Apart, pretty important book, you know that the breakdown which has existed in the lower class of America for a long time has spread rapidly to the middle class. The spiritual darkness, the absence of Christianity, which missionary Bob wanted to remedy in Slovakia, has come to America. Much of our country is functionally pagan. This county, if you look at the census going back to 2010 might as well be 1500s at this point, right? It really has. The advent of the internet and the things have moved so quick. It's a very shocking change that has occurred in our culture. But even back then, huge portions of this county is unclaimed. In other words, they don't say they're a member in a church, okay? About half of the county. Now, it may be that they actually are, and they just didn't say so or whatever. But when you get into the stats and you look at most Midwestern cities, at least half or more of these towns aren't Christian at all. And you know these people, think about it. I mean, think about the people that even say they are Christian. And I'm not having some sort of pietistic, really crazy high standard here. We're just talking about basic doctrine, basic holiness. It's lacking. It's lacking. So as I saw my people, my countrymen, descend into the darkness of an apostate Christian culture, and that is our culture. Post-Christian, I don't know. I think it's apostate. I think this culture exists as a reaction against Christianity. I think it's antagonistic to its core against Christianity. I think that's something different. It's like when you cast out a demon, 7 come back. Now that they've rejected the lordship of Jesus, what's filled them up is even more wicked, right? As I consider that, my heart for China shrunk, and my heart for America grew. Now, some people think I'm against foreign missions. I'm not. I just don't like foreign missionaries very much. If I'm going to be very straight with you. And the reason I don't like many of them, the ones I know, and I only know so many, so that's my sample of the population, okay? I don't have a citation for you. The ones I know, when I look at their marriages, and in particular their children, I find it very difficult to respect them. I can't tell you how many MKs, missionary kids, I've met with deep daddy issues and who aren't walking with the Lord. In many cases, their parents ventured into some foreign land while sending their kids to a boarding school, like the Black Forest Academy in Germany, so dad and mom can love someone else's kids for Jesus. Now, I know that not all missionaries are like that, praise the Lord. I know some good men. But it's a trend. It's a trend in the homes of pastors. That skateboard ministry I participated in for a couple years, helped lead, brought us to a lot of churches, and pastors would put us up in their home, and that was great. But I'd also have an opportunity to see the family dynamic, and it was concerning. It was concerning to me. I was scared to become a parent for a lot of the things I saw. How many pastors neglect their family for some other family and justify it as service unto the Lord? Too many. It's a trend with street preachers. That's another one I'm always running into with. Street preachers. They will drive miles to a football game to boldly preach to strangers who walk out of the stadium, but they have never declared the goodness of the gospel to their coworker or neighbor right next to them, right across the street. It's a trend in churches. How many churches outsource so much to foreign missions, whereas there is very little going on evangelistically in their own locale? And look, it's a trend with everybody. We make much of our service elsewhere, often service that we merely fund without any direct participation, to excuse our failure to minister to those closest to us, to those who are our direct responsibility. Now imagine a husband and a father who provides for widows and orphans, while his own wife and children starve and go without. I know a man who was deeply involved in the fight against abortion, child slaughter. Good thing to be involved in. Gave his life to it. But he neglected all his children, and he lost all his children to the world. And I asked him about it. And he said, well, you know, it was more or less, I had this cause. This cause was greater. No, these are your children. These are your responsibilities. Save your complicated argument. I don't want to hear it. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Now, this is talking about finances, but that provision goes much deeper, obviously. And that is the American church. This is who we are. We have failed to provide for our own, and therefore our household, that is our nation, is a complete wreck. Now, there are some who recognize that we're in a bad situation, right? I'm on Gab. Can't figure out how I feel about Gab. Like, I think I prefer the liberal feminists on Twitter to the conservatives on Gab. There are some that recognize the bad situation we're in, but they represent the even worse derivation of this trend. That is the trend of the internet Christian, who talks about national and global issues and how he or she would rebuild this fallen nation back from ashes. And they love to talk about big ideas and sweeping reforms and so forth. Civil war, right? Secession. People love to talk about that. Hey, dude, can you run an 8-minute mile? Right? You own a gun. Do you have a dry pantry? Right? If you lost electricity, would you be able to live for a couple days? Well, no. It's civil war. I mean, come on. Some of this talk, let me just be real straight with you. You sound like an idiot. Like an idiot. Now, I'm not saying there won't come a time for that. That's not what I'm saying. But you, joker, are not going to be ready for it. If it comes, maybe set your sights a little bit lower, right? People that love to talk about these ideas, and they just talk and postulate and theorize, and they haven't taken a single step locally. Their service isn't even in a foreign land. It's not even outsourced. It exists only in the landscape of their mind or in some digital forum. Hence, their Christianity is the internet Christianity, and therefore just worthless. Worthless. What good is salt if it's lost its flavor? One of my favorite things to ask those sort of Christians when they talk about their big idea is, what are you personally doing about it, right? They get very defensive really quick. Talkers always do. So my call to you, instead of big ideas and big goals, is focus on applying basic ideas in small ways and actually get something done. I was best friends with a man who's probably the most talented athlete I ever knew. I worked his corner in the Olympic trials. It was awesome, a boxer. Way more talented than me, but I ended up going much further in sports than him. He was annoying, right? We'd go to a golf range, and I would hit it 150 yards, but what direction? Who knows, right? Every time, it was dangerous. He would hit it, and it would go just perfect. Like every old white guy thought they had the next Tiger Woods that they're going to disciple. They'd all surround him, and. But, the talent that he had didn't outweigh his lack of discipline, right? It ran out. And discipline, building godly habits, will always go further than just pure gifts from the Lord if you waste them. So take small steps. Now, I'm going to give you just a few small steps. I don't want to go long. I'm not deleting Twitter or Facebook. I know they're storing all my information, right? The joke's kind of on them. Don't go offline or camp out in some little right-wing ghetto. Stay connected, stay active on the main platforms as much as you can, but take your online network offline as quick as you can. When you find someone that's worthwhile, don't just follow them, but connect with them. Get their email, talk to them, network. Create real world networks. That'll quickly help you find out who's for real and who's not, right? And, you can hear people talk, it's like a guy that pretends to be a car mechanic, and then you ask him how to fix something, and he tells you, well, you got to fix the wobble shaft. And you're like, that's not a thing. So it gives you a chance to know them. So step one is it's good to build networks. The internet's an incredible amplifier and multiplier of connections. And, I've used Twitter to build things up like this. And I antagonize people sometimes on there just so it goes viral on purpose, so I can connect with more like-minded people and build these offline networks. But it's worthless if it just stays online. And again, I want to challenge you to share numbers, tell your story, connect here with people that are like-minded and actually doing something. 2, build an analog library or download files of important books and documents. I don't know, what is it? Is it 1984? Is it Brave New World? Or did 1984 and Brave New World get drunk and have a baby? Is that where we live right now? Because it seems like that's kind of where we live. And so they're killing information, not letting you see it, but they're also throwing, we got rid of Netflix. How can you have Netflix? I'm not a fundy that likes to guilt people on this stuff at all, but they're going after our children. It was Emily and I was watching, we came into the room and the girls were watching My Little Pony. Now, I grew up in the 80s and I wasn't a fan of My Little Pony, but then again, I wasn't a girl. So I came in there and I thought, this is fine. And then it was this weird plot line about girls breaking up with boys to make other boys jealous. And there was kind of a real erotic sexual element to it that was, what in the world are they watching? And even so it's not just the crazy things that make the news. It's actually the subtle things are all through that. And so get good stuff. We started buying records, and it's not the hipster in me. Fine, buy CDs, buy whatever. But get analog stuff that is not easily deleted. And people say, well, they could burn that. Well, yeah, they can. These aren't foolproof. They can kill us and we'll go to heaven, right? We're trying to make it harder for them. You understand? Everyone thinks that they can think of a way that your steps won't work. They think that's helpful. I know that, okay? We're just trying to take practical steps here. Now, and these are in no order of importance. Find a community that's a winnable and worthwhile hill. This is a place that's small enough for you to have influence, large and strategic enough to have some cultural, economic, and political significance. This is a relative thing. And people think I'm just rural and against the urban. I'm not at all. I think I know my bandwidth, I know my connections, I know what I can do, and I don't think I have a shot at winning Cincinnati. And I didn't want to live in the city because I got 7 kids, right? But I think some of you might have that. You might do that, just don't get, take Tim Keller. Tim Keller's problem is he's a coward. I have his church planning manual, and it's fantastic. It's really good. A lot of the things he says is very true, and I still use those things. Look, if someone you don't like tells you something that's true, it doesn't stop being true. I think sometimes we get too big for our britches, and we can't stand the heat. And you might think you could stand the heat of Manhattan. I don't know that I could. Maybe I would do the same thing. Maybe I would soften. Icarus got too close to the sun, I think. So know where you want to go. We chose Batavia because it's a small county seat that we think people have been sleeping on. Claremont County is a pretty important county here in a purplish swing state that is Ohio, right next to Hamilton. A lot of the people that work down in Hamilton, they're people of influence, live out here. We think we could come in here and be a huge blessing and have massive influence pretty quick within a couple of years. And it does seem like the Lord has given us favor, and that's happening. And so that's how we made that decision. Plus, I like it here. Like people always, someone was like, why do you feel so called to the east side? I like the people. I like the place. It's a very, very good reason to move somewhere, okay? Doesn't have to get super complicated. Oh, one more thing on that. So the internet has changed things. We can be a little more productive than we used to from home. That's cool. We can kind of you can start your own internet business from home. That gives you a marketplace reach, and that's awesome. But I do find that I think people are a little detached if they think they can go in the middle of nowhere and build something without some economy to support it. And so we know that Cincinnati's got a big river that goes right through the middle of it. It's got important highways. You can get to the largest portion of America in 8 hours from here than anywhere else. CVG is a huge place for DHL, and we have lots of warehouses here for that reason. And so Cincinnati, while it's not recession-proof, it does well in recessions. And we thought people could actually get jobs here, and people could support. I looked at other places and thought about moving there, but then it was just so expensive. And now this was before the housing market lost its mind, right? But it was so expensive, I kept thinking, like, how can people start a life here? That's how we thought about it. That's how we came to our place. People were like, go to Texas. Texas is so much better. I'm like, that's where all the Californians are going, right? It's like just turning into California, and it's fine till it gets cold. Then things get a little rough down in Texas, don't they? And then, I'm going to go to Montana. It's safer up there. Hey, one word, drones, right? Drones. Where do people think they're hiding from? You think you can escape this government? You think you can go anywhere? You don't think they'll find you? If that's what it comes down to? What are you smoking? This is more of this nonsense that nobody's talk about online. Now, I don't have a problem with you going to Montana. It's a beautiful country. It's like the moon. I drove through there once. It was really strange. But if you're going there to try to get away from tyrants, there is nowhere to go, friends. You have to put your feet down and face these people down. This is the only thing that bullies respond to. Only thing. So find a community of people that you can stand with, wherever that may be. Montana, Ohio, Moscow, wherever. Ask, could this town or county become a city-state? That's the question I like to ask. Right? Could this be like Sparta or Athens? And then put down roots. I'm not leaving here. Not till I die. That's it. This is it for us. If this church plant fails, I'm not leaving here. I'm going to join some other Baptist church, I guess. I'll be a Presbyterian living with you filthy Baptists. When you dedicate them, I'll just throw water on them. Like, oh, now the covenant child has been properly dealt with. Next step. Now this is the hard, I think this is the hardest one. This is the hardest one. Get to know your neighbors. Get to know them, okay? I don't care how awkward it is. We met our neighbors when we kept trying to get over there. I was traveling a lot when we moved into our new house, but I met them and it was awkward. It was very awkward. You know, like so I had this is like a football field between my house and theirs. So like when you walk over, you can't just like get away from the awkward conversation. You know, you turn around, you walk for a football field. And like everyone just feels, wow, that was weird. It's gonna be weird. So what? Grow up. Get to know them. Go over and stop. You know, holidays are awesome, right? Bring them over cookies. We used to do that leading up to our Christmas Eve service. We'd have a Christmas Eve service where we just read different passages and sing Christmas-themed hymns. And we would invite people we'd just make a big thing of cookies with the invitation and go door to door and talk to them. Back then, this was in South Carolina. Our neighbors were elderly, and not a lot of them came, but a lot of them don't have family around anymore, and they just want someone to talk to them and be loved, you know? Great opportunity. Find simple ways like that. Share meals, build trust, learn to enjoy each other. Stay away from labels. I'm going to tell you a secret about Democrats and Republicans. They both like safe neighborhoods, right? They do. They do. And people aren't smart. They don't really know what they're talking about, them and their labels, right? You start to press them on it, you know. I remember a guy called me up and he said, "Are you a theonomic reconstructionist?" And I said, "Well, of what sort, you know?" "Well, you know." And I'm just quiet on phones when people say dumb things. And I don't. There's multiple types. I'd like to understand, who have you read? You know, well, I've just been online. Online, huh? I'm not answering this question. But look, don't get lost in those labels. You know, liberal feminists love me. I know you might not believe it, but we get along just fine. And eventually it gets rough, but but generally it starts very well, okay? My point to you is that we're all made in the image of God. We all have basic desires, and you can create a lot of connection with these people if you just try, just a little effort. You know, most helpful advice is simple but not easy. Look for ways to improve your community that builds a coalition around the common good. You might think that sounds like a liberal. I don't care. You're not going to build coalitions around the common good? What are you going to do? Stay in your house, argue on Facebook? You know? Make yourself a central part of the work in your community. In other words, be a leader. Buy local wherever possible and reasonable. You know, I don't really do much in boycotts because where would I shop, right? But I do try to shop local as much as I can and support people that are trying to do things. Open a business in your town. You want to help people? Give them jobs. You know, how many of us have found mentors in the workplace but not in the church? You know, the opportunity to get into people's life for the power of the gospel is power that's there. You're feeding their family by opening up your business. That's a great opportunity to do it. Buy and rehab old buildings, right? Why would Christians like trash? Why do we like trash? Why do we like cheap, ugly buildings? When did ugly become good? Ugly is ugly, all right? And when we see beautiful workmanship, that's one thing I love about Cincinnati's done a very good job at preserving their old buildings. And you come in there and you see the woodwork, and you just think someone cared about this, right? Someone wanted to get it right, not cheap and fast. It's beautiful. There's something good about that. I wanted a cathedral so bad, but it's not going to happen. So That's all right, but they're beautiful. And I know you can lose yourself in the worship of that. But our problem is we swing from one ditch to the other, constantly back and forth. Buy old buildings, show people you care about it, and encourage people to do the same. Strengthen the local economy, make it attractive to like-minded people. We're trying to do that here at Batavia. We've been blessed to have 5 or 6 families move here already, and it's great. We want to build a community that attracts like-minded folks. Some of them will come here not Christians. They'll come here for other reasons, and then we'll convert them through the power of the gospel. That's what we'll do. Run for any and all local offices and encourage all like-minded Christian community members to do likewise. All the dumb ones, comptroller, health department, all those are very powerful. Zoning. You want to stop? You guys, I don't know if you guys know the story of the Creation Museum, but we were around for when it went down. They had this plot of land, and it didn't work out, and they ended up getting a better plot of land. But it was this huge battle between them and zoning and all that stuff. Zoning, someone tries to bring in some sort of, those ratty stores you see, Golden Lion or whatever, when you're driving, they're like a adult store. Zoning can just keep it out. We just keep losing their applications or whatever. We'll just keep them out. They're pagans. They're wicked. We don't want that in here, right? Or you can just find a legit way, whatever. My point is that get involved. First, start simple. Show up to a meeting. Like read, learn what these things did. I didn't know what a lot of these things meant. I didn't know what a comptroller was for a long time. And I'm going to tell you a secret. I still don't. But you want your neighbors, the ones you've grown tight with, to be the workers in the Department of Health that decide, you know what, it's good. We're not going to close down this coffee shop. We're going to let them stay open. Or we're just going to gum up the works. I mean, if you're a healthcare worker right now, probably the best strategy with this mandatory vaccine is just keep gumming it up, drag it out, make it painful to where, I saw a hospital today has decided they're going to stop requiring the mandate because they're losing huge portions of their workforce. There's other ways to make it difficult, make it hard for them. I used to complain about every zoning rule I could think of, every building code I could think of with our local abortion clinic in South Carolina. I'd call and complain about the height of their fences and their bushes, whatever I could think of, just to be annoying, to make it harder on them. You can do that in the negative, but you can also do it in the positive. But you want the sheriff to know that you're good people and this is stupid and stand with you. Head of polling, I don't know if you noticed this last election, but actually having control over being a pollster or being at the polling center. I did that as a kid. I was an 18-year-old in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, in charge of I don't know how many votes. It had to be like 1,000. 18 years old, right? What's your excuse? I did it to get out of school. School would have been better. I'm not going to lie to you. It was hard work. They had changed the boundaries that year, and everyone was mad when I had to say you're at the wrong place. But you can get involved there. That's a good place to start. Now, the most important one, with some caveats, is belong to a church in your actual community as much as is possible. When I first thought about this, I was pessimistic about the state of our churches, but it turned out they were worse than I thought they were. With Black Lives Matter and the response to it, with the tyranny that came from a lot of good churches during the pandemic. And let me just be clear with you. I won't do mass, but I think that's the session's choice. They can choose to do that. Like that's up to the elders board, the leadership of the church. That's their choice. But I was surprised how a lot of these people reacted and how oppressive they really were. They wouldn't interact with the people in a respectful way. And these were churches that I've sent people to before, even if they weren't as reformed or whatever. They taught the Bible. If they're complementarian, whatever, like it's better than the other places. And I thought they're all right churches. But there was a deep rot, okay? A deep rot, I think, that surprised everybody. And so I know that some of y'all have to drive pretty far, but as close as you can be. Be willing to compromise in some secondary issues, right? It's funny, Presbyterians and Baptists get along pretty well at conferences, they do. And they used to share, during the First Great Awakening, they would share pulpits quite often, especially as you got past Appalachia, for obvious reasons. That was the frontier at the time. But be willing to compromise on maybe peripheral might be a better issue or way to put it. If it means being in a more local congregation that's addressing the core issues of our day. Now, if there isn't a single good church in your community, there's really only two options. If there's not a church you can be part of and reform, you either start one or move. Reform, start one, or move. Anyone think of a fourth option? I can't. That's all you can do. And you'll have to look and think soberly and just decide how much does your local church matter to you. Right? That feels like a passive-aggressive jab. It's not. It's aggressive-aggressive. Right? I mean it. How much does it matter to you? Right? How much will it matter that your kids grow up underneath weak sauce preaching? Right? They're in their 20s, and you see the effect of that. And then those years are gone. You'll have to make that decision. I will tell you one warning on moving for a church. Idealists come in and they find out that, I'm so glad not to be Christ Church in Moscow. This sounds horrible to me. 500 people moving, like all there. They listen to the Canon app and, those people call us up all the time. What's your position on yada, 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 yada. They 1,000 issues, And it's because they listened to 20 books, this month on the Canon app. And I was like, man, this person's going to be miserable in our church, I want to say, I always want to tell people crazy things, just to leave me alone. I think Monsanto made essential oils, and that's the real cause of autism. And then they don't come, And I'm like, all right, our church will have peace for a little while longer. But if you're an idealist, the church is not perfect anywhere, okay? Right? Every church is a mixture of pure and impure. But some have become so evil that they are truly synagogues of Satan. And if you're surrounded by synagogues of Satan, by all means, create one or go somewhere else. But if you go there, recognize that idealists, they just destroy real things, right? Because they're visionaries and they live in that fake space between their ears where nothing ever gets done. And they're looking to create something that's not real. So as you look for that church, if you come there, you're going to find that there's troublesome leaders and problems. And, homeschoolers, they say they are awkward. I don't know a lot of them are awkward, but they're also Christians and they haven't been deceived by terrible lies in the public schools, right? So if you go to a church that's heavy on homeschool, you're going to have homeschool issues. You're going to find that out. If you go to a church that's a bunch of public school, you're going to find out the horrible things they're doing on TikTok, right? Each church has its problems. And so as you find that church, don't be the idealist that's a pain in the butt to a good man that's willing to stand, hold up good elders, and then work towards reformation and recognize that reformation doesn't take years or decades. It often takes centuries, It takes a while. Now, how is this evangelism? That's where I started, make missions local again. Well, it isn't in a strict sense. It's you being salt and light. It's being salt and light and applying the word of God here where you live. And when you do that, the opportunities to preach the gospel, not even share the gospel, declare it, preach it, herald it, there are many. They're everywhere, right? The field is white and ready for the harvest, but the laborers are not out there. There are few. And so as you do these things, it's just opportunities pop up. I always think about Jesus and the woman at the well. The well is a truck stop. Jesus is tired and he wants a drink. And he comes in there and he says, woman, will you give me a bottle of water? And she says, why are you talking to the Samaritan? And then he says, hey, if you knew who I was, you'd ask for a bottle of water that gives you everlasting life. It's weird. It's a weird transition. Do people forget that? But it's just along the way. It's along the way of life. And I'm telling you, when you actually dig in deep into your community and get involved and do those things, people see the power of the gospel in your life and they will ask you, or when you don't care if they ask you, because we don't have to, we've been given a mandate, they do listen. God works through that. That's how we start to make missions local again. Now, We've got George, Chris, Aaron, John, and Matt here. And the reason they're here is for us to think these things through. How are we going to do this? So what you need to be thinking the whole time is, why does God have me here for where I'm going back to? What are you going to do? What do you need to do? How will you apply? Keep listening. Keep listening very carefully. Write them down. Take the good notes. And then when you go home, do something, okay? Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this time to gather, to worship you and think through how we can apply your word to all of life, God, and bring you glory. God, give us spines. As your apostles prayed, give us boldness to preach your word. God, help us to pull ourselves out of just the fake talking and just showmanship that is online, and actually start working here with your church. We ask this in the name of your Son. Amen.